Guys, for being late. We had a closed session that took a little bit longer than we had perceived. Want to welcome Council Member Mitch O'Farrell to his first meeting on the committee. Maybe you can make some comments and say hello to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real briefly, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much, and thrilled to be on this committee and to be of service to all of our neighborhoods. So I look forward to this meeting, and I look forward to serving with you and working with you into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Nori Martinez will be here shortly, and at that time we'll open it up for her to make some comments to you. Why don't we start with the agenda, and if we could do the commissioners first?
Sure.
Item number 3 is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of a Ms. Karen Mack to the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2018.
Okay.
Item number 4 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Victor Medina to the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2015.
Thank you very much. And let me thank both of you for being here. And let's see, before we get started on our questions, let me ask Mr. Schaefer to come up. He wants to speak on both 3 and 4, and you could have that mic on the end right there.
Chairman Parks, Councilmember O'Farrell, welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Leonard Schaefer, Vice President, Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. With regards to Karen, I just want to say I'm really glad to see that she is being reappointed. I've enjoyed working with her, and I know that I will continue to enjoy working with her. And as to Victor, I'm very glad to see that we're coming back up to strength. And I look forward, I just met him today, read his resume and everything, and I very much look forward to working with him and getting us back to a good functioning commission once again. Speaking in favor of both appointments.
Thank you very much. And that's on items 3 and 4. So while we start off, Ms. Mack, why don't you give us, you're being reappointed, give us an overview of what you believe has been the accomplishments since you've been on the commission, and what do you look forward to?
Well, let me first say thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be reappointed because I feel like the neighborhood council movement, despite the challenges, as Councilman O'Farrell and I were just talking about, of, trying to be an advocate in the midst of all of everything else in your life, the neighborhood council movement represents democracy with a small d, and it's really an opportunity for us to engage citizens. And so what I've really enjoyed over the past 4 years that I've been on the commission is connecting with that energy in the city and recognizing that despite what people say about Los Angeles, there are people who are interested in being engaged, and it really is our job as a commission to support them in being engaged as effectively as possible. And so a couple of the things that we've done over the last couple of years have been over this last 6 months is to really look at the plan for neighborhood councils and to really strengthen that so that they can be supportive. The other thing that we've done, which I'm hoping you all will support us on, is to start the Empower LA Awards, which is really focused on celebrating the accomplishments of neighborhood councils and really making them more visible to the broader community so that, things like what happened when the space shuttle came and neighborhood councils got together to make sure the community benefited from that as opposed to suffered, or great planning that's being done in Toluca Lake in terms of creating design overlay plans, et cetera, et cetera. We have some really strong neighborhood councils, and we want to see the system get stronger. So I look forward to being a part of that and to working with you all to do that.
Let me ask you, what is your perception of the large project that the commission has taken on to reevaluate neighborhood councils and look at the issue of the factual-based stakeholder and a variety of things?
Well, I think it's important. With any system, I think it's important to reevaluate it on an ongoing basis regularly, and I think that's what this process is about. The neighborhood council system has been around for about 10 years, and so, it is a good time because there's been the opportunity for it to develop to some extent, and now let's reevaluate what's happened over those 10 years and fine-tune the situation. So, I feel like that's an important part of our work as commissioners, to support the development of a strong foundation for the system.
Let me let the record reflect, Council Member Nuri Martinez is here with us and will be participating in this discussion. Ms. Mitch?
Commissioner Mack, thank you for your 4 years of service, and thank you for stepping up again for your renewed spot on the commission. It's commendable, and it's all volunteer basis, and you're volunteering to make our city better and empower our neighborhood councils to the best degree possible. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Martinez?
Thank you both for your service. Thank you very much, the service that you do for your prospective communities and for the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And let me just make a couple of questions. My notes together. Mr. Medina, now you come from the neighborhood council process. Why don't you give us a little background of what neighborhood councils you serve? I understand you've been on several, or you at least monitor several.
Correct. First of all, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate every single one of you for the opportunity given to me. Pretty much experience that I have, I've been serving different neighborhood councils throughout 4 years. I've been pretty much as an outreach coordinator, also, as a community advocate for many of them. Pretty much all in the harbor. I've been through different neighborhood councils, set in, in different levels of pretty much of the committee. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is, people that serve in the neighborhood council, their passion, volunteering, and their passion giving to the community. Obviously they're all volunteers, but my main thing and reason why I want to, be a commissioner is to guide them. They need guidance. That's pretty much a mentor to guide them through the couple process. And now there's a lot of misgiving information to our residents, but that's what I want to do. I want to guide, all of our pretty much neighborhood councils through the right path.
So your mission, or what you believe in being on this commission, is to help neighborhood councils function productively.
That is correct. And as well, pretty much is, to increase that membership in the neighborhood councils, as well as to get, more youth participant. Some of the neighborhood councils now have youth participation, and I like that. And, we need young people to come to our neighborhood councils to share their concerns as well as to be addressed. So that's my main thing as well.
Okay. Let me just ask one question of the CLA's office. It doesn't appear we have either one of their ethics report.
The information has been turned in by Mr. Medina. He's received it. They both received the documentation, and Mr. Medina has turned in his information. And Ms. Mack, I believe, is in the process of doing that. They have 21 days to get that information in.
I beg to differ. I turned mine in yesterday, so.
So the thing is that we'd like to make sure that those ethics packages are with the file when it comes to council.
Okay.
So we'll have a complete file. And then when are we scheduled to go to council?
We don't have a schedule yet, Council Member. And we were told that we need to check with the Council President's office first before scheduling them in council.
All right. If we can make sure the package is complete,
Yes.
I appreciate it. Let me thank both of you for being here and look forward to seeing you in council. I've moved that we approve both of the commissions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Martinez, this is your first meeting. Would you like to say something to our audience?
No, I'm happy to be here. I know we are closed session adjourned a little late this afternoon, so I apologize, but thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we go back to the agenda, and our first item.
Item number 1 is a motion Labange O'Farrell relative to the current use agreements with Los Angeles Unified School District, the Los Angeles Community College District, and the Los Angeles County of Education to establish a citywide joint use committee for the purpose of developing programs for school parks in the city.
Let me ask you, it looks like item 2 is almost identical.
Yes.
Do we have that at the same time?
Yes. Item number 2 is a motion for Sadia Labange relative to current joint use agreements with LAUSD, the process of establishing additional joint use agreements with LAUSD sites in Council District 1, and to identify potential funding sources. Also referred to the Arts, Parks, Health, Aging, and River Committee.
Okay. Before we get started, we have 2 speaker cards on item 1 and none on item 2. Is it Astrid Dahl and Teresa Dahl? No, just introduce yourself, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm Astrid Dahl. I'm a landscape architect. I work with Mia Lehrer and Associate. We're working on the Ella River Master Plan. We've worked on the Silver Lake Reservoir pedestrian path, Vista Hermosa Park. I'm here today because we've been working on school campuses for the past 20 years. I mean, Mia did, and I've done with her for the past 5 years, trying to green our campus for the city of LA. We know that LAUSD is a second landowner in Los Angeles, and we know that most of their campus are entirely unpermeable and covered with asphalt. And as landscape architect, we've been passionate about trying to make the campus more sustainable, greener, and a better place for all. We believe that changes on LAUSD campus would benefit the teachers, the student community, but also the community and Angelenos in general. We've just completed the Natural History Museum garden, and we've seen that with very little square footage, we can make great changes and bring wildlife and treat stormwater. We've been working with nonprofit, and we've applied for a series of Proposition 84 grants through the state of California. Some of them were awarded. We have a few others filed. We've right now are in the process of trying to get those grants kind of signed off by LAUSD and get the project moving forward, and we're facing a lot of obstacles and challenges. So I'm here to support the motion. I'm here to tell you that we would really love your support in making school campuses greener and more sustainable. We think that this is a very kind of the timeline of this issue is crucial, and I hope you'll appoint people that can help us move and make changes.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Teresa Dahl. I am here wearing 2 hats. I'm an LAUSD parent, and I'm also work for People for Parks, who currently operates 2 community school parks, one at Trinity Elementary and one at Vine in Hollywood. And we currently operate those parks with Beyond the Bell, and it costs about $50,000 a year, which we primarily raise through grant funding. As a parent, so I'm very passionate about this, and I want to thank you all first for bringing this motion forward. And as Astrid said, I feel strongly that this is so important for our city. We have the opportunity to do something really phenomenal to change to improve the environment and improve the lives of our communities and redress the park deficit problem in our city. I'm also a parent at a community school park, Carthay, and I also work with Saturn Elementary, and I'm helping them with their community school park projects as well as Prop 84 grants. And as Astrid mentioned, the state has funded almost $3 million currently for sustainable, accessible parks at schools, and we have another $3 million almost pending. And we're expecting to hear back from the state by the end of this month, so this is very timely. We need help with creating a model to provide the access. It all kind of hinges on being able to build partnerships and make the access possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Vicki Israel, Assistant General Manager for Recreation and Parks for Partnership and Revenue Branch. Both of these motions we actually touched on at Arts Parks Committee this past week, or last week, and we are going to combine them. We are going to work together with LAUSD to report back in detail on everything. But I just wanted to share with you that we do have currently with Recreation and Parks and LAUSD 28 joint use agreements. 6 of them are pools only, 21 of them are athletic fields, and there is 1 joint use agreement that is an athletic and an aquatic facility.
Could you give those numbers again?
Yes, there's 28 official joint use agreements, and I use the term official. There's 6 that are with pools, 21 that are just athletic fields, and then there's 1 facility that we have a joint use with athletic fields and a swimming pool. In your council district, District CD8, we have 1 joint use agreement at Crenshaw. In Council District 6, we have 1, which is at Birmingham High School, and in your council district, CD13, we have 4, which is Belmont, Dayton, Helen Bernstein, and Washington Irving. However, in addition to that, we also have what are called seasonal license agreements, which are different. It's terminology, truthfully, but it's seasonal, where we go in and we actually operate some of the pools. There's 4 of them that exist today, depending on funding, whether or not we use them, but we do actually have 4 of those seasonal agreements, licensed agreements, they're called. We met with LAUSD last week. We are going to look at joint use. You're absolutely right that accessibility is one of the issues. They shared with us that there's no longer the philosophy of believing that you can just open the gates and let the public in. There must be supervision, and that's why it's so important to have partnerships with some of the nonprofits in the communities, like People for Parks, who actually pays for or could even operate those 2 schools. So they are looking for partners. We are going to specifically look at one of the motions actually is specifically asking in Council District 1 to look at the potential of new joint use opportunities and to actually look for some partners. So we're going to try to do that collectively. So we will come back to Arts Parks, definitely, committee, and bring a joint report with LAUSD.
One thing you mentioned earlier, that you contemplate merging these 2 motions. I was just wondering, on the first item 1, where they request that a process be established for citywide joint use committee for the purpose of developing partnerships, would that be encompassing of what CD1 is asking to occur in his district?
Correct.
Okay.
It is.
Sure. I just would like to commend Ms. Deal and Ms. Dahl for your incredible volunteerism and vision for this. I firmly believe that our schools are our community centers, and that I know when I was a kid, I went to public schools and they didn't have fences around them. You just waltzed in and, you played and you did a pickup game and you did whatever. And I know that we live in a different age and we absolutely have to have security, and that's critical and important. But I want to just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, and I'm committed to working with my colleagues and to help identify additional resources so that we can really embellish these existing joint use agreements that we have, because some of them are troubled, and I'm aware of that. It's not a perfect system that we have, but I'm committed to figuring this out because it benefits all of our communities and it benefits children everywhere. And lastly, I'll just say, our neighborhoods need them, and typically our most underserved neighborhoods where there's an obesity epidemic, and we need to do everything we can to enhance a child's quality of life and to enhance the quality of life for our families that might live right around the corner from a school that has an 8-foot fence that they can't get to on a beautiful weekend, and that's a cry and shame. So I look forward to working with you all to do everything I can to change that for the better. So thank you.
Thank you.
I can attest to Leah Mayer's work. I've had the pleasure of working with your firm in my past job as executive director of a small environmental nonprofit. And I've, of course, know the work of People for Parks, so I'm very excited for you to be here. Let me know how I can be helpful with LAUSD. I still have good relationships there. And we got to move this along because joint use agreements is absolutely the way to go. And I really believe in what we were building when I was there, community schools, which is the community is centered around the school, and activities take place at a school, but you can't do it without having the cooperation of the city and the nonprofits and the school. And safety is absolutely, a priority, so you have to make sure that people are safe, whether you've seen the campuses. So if there's anything I can do on that side, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask, on item 1, to make a very minor amendment and just add on the second line of the therefore move, after the word agreements, just add by council district so that we ensure we get a report that's going to identify it by council district. And then that we ask that we merge item 1 and 2 and request Rec and Park to respond to both of those simultaneously.
Thank
So we'd move item 1 and 2 to the council, with that amendment.
Good.
All right, the next item.
The next item is item number 5. It's a motion, Weiss or Rosenthal.
Let me just ask you, the largest number of cards we have is 5. Can we do 6 on and get, so people are not,
Okay, you want to do 6 now?
do 6 and we'll hold 5 to last.
Okay.
We can give it the appropriate amount of time.
Yes, sir. Item number 6 is the city attorney report and ordinance amending section 20.36 and 22.816 and deleting section 22.801.2 of the Los Angeles Administrative Code regarding neighborhood council elections.
Okay. Let me bring up our speakers before we have city staff come up. We have a couple of speakers, Rick Coca. We have Tony Wilkinson. Ivan Spiegel. Leonard Schaefer. The 4 speakers. And the next 2 will be Glenn Bailey, Joanne, Yannick Garb, and Kathy Deldana. So when they finish speaking, the next 3 can come up and fill those seats. Okay? On the right here. Just give your name. Go. Give your name.
Okay. Good afternoon, council people, and welcome to the new members. It's really nice to hear that you really want to be here, because we love having you. My name is Ivan Spiegel. I work mostly in the neighborhood council system as a parliamentarian, an election specialist. I also work for the city clerk and the county registrar as a poll inspector, and I was an independent election administrator at the last election. I like that we're finally working together with the city clerk rather than one or the other. I think there were several problems with the last round of elections that were administered by Dunn, mostly having to do with staffing. We didn't have enough staff to really do the paperwork properly, and the city clerk will now be hopefully taking on that piece of the elections, which is playing into the best part of both agencies. The thing that we were able to accomplish was the outreach portion. We were able to go out into the communities. We were able to recruit candidates. These are things that the city clerk was not prepared to do in the year before. We had a major turnout. We had much better numbers than the 2010 elections. I'm going to brag a little bit. My neighborhood council, which is Venice, had the highest turnout in the city. I'm embarrassed to say we only had 1,600 voters. I would like to have seen it 2 or 3 times more than that. But mostly it was about recruiting candidates and working with them. We would tell our candidates, hey, there's a festival here. Go campaign there. So it allowed us to really do this work. The IEAs were involved with the councils rather than just sitting in an office somewhere. And I'd like to recommend that it says right now that the city clerk would be the lead agency. I'd like to have the department be the lead agency at this point, if you agree.
Sir?
Tony Wilkinson, Panorama City, and it's great to see my councilwoman on this committee. It's wonderful. I just want to revisit how we got here. The city clerk and an old administration came with a completely unreasonable cost estimate for running neighborhood council elections. City council looked at it and said, we just can't do this in conscience. The city was in dire straits. Then the neighborhood councils came back and said, but wait a minute, we're being disenfranchised, and we really need to have our elections. And so the city council, thank you, allowed us to go out and in partnership for 1 year with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to conduct elections with a partnership, where I was proud to be and honored to be an independent election administrator on the west side for my colleagues, Big Venice Neighborhood Council. We had really, doing this collaboratively, we answered a lot of the cost challenge. And now that the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment has shown that it can do this, I would love to, and I am fully supportive. Isaiah Cantu, who's here, did a lot of wonderful work that enabled us in the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to do these great elections. But I worry that in a future administration, you never know what cost estimates could come back from a city clerk that might have mandated authority. I'd really like to see, and I was the author of both the Neighborhood Council Coalition Resolution and the Valley Alliance Resolution, and the simple idea is please return the power to run neighborhood council elections to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment with the ability to partner with other departments as appropriate, and we certainly want to partner with the city clerk. We hope it's a lasting bond and will go on happily forever, but I'm really concerned that the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment be the key agency to avoid the cost problems we had in the past.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes, council members, I hope I can get all of this in 2 minutes. Once again, representing the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, Councilmember Parks brought up during Karen Mack's reappointment, the program that we instituted with regards to redoing the plan for neighborhood councils. I was part of that. Now apparently I've come to be leading that particular venture. The working groups had numerous motions that they looked at. One had to do with the ordinance and what we want to do with elections. And they came up with a motion which the commission has now taken up, and that is that the elections be handled by the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, that the department should be allowed to partner with the city clerk and other city departments with regards to administration of the elections. We put out a survey monkey with the help of the department to find out not just how the working groups, the various working groups throughout the city felt about it, but how neighborhood council members themselves felt about it. I've been giving the results, and thus far, with regards to the overall motion, we have 232 responses in support and 89 responses in opposition. But to put those 89 in perspective, some of them had an opposition to one part or another of the motion that had to do with perhaps whether or not there should be term limits and such as that, because that was also part of the motion. So it seems overwhelming that neighborhood council members themselves want the department to administer the elections, being able to partner with the city clerk and with other members of the city family in doing so. And I can tell you that from the last number of joint meetings of the working groups, which are throughout the city of Los Angeles, the vote was overwhelming to support the department running neighborhood council elections. There was some objection to some of the other portions of it, but all in all, we find very, very favorable response from neighborhood councils with regards to this.
Thank you. We have Glenn Bailey next, and
Joanne.
and then we have Kathy on her way up, and also Mary Garcia. That's the last speaker.
Good afternoon, Chairman Parks, and welcome Councilmember O'Farrell and Martinez. My name is Glenn Bailey. My initial comments are going to be referencing my position as of this year as Vice Chair of the Los Angeles Neighborhood Council Coalition, a coalition of the 95 neighborhood councils in the city of Los Angeles. You should have a copy, I'm not sure if it got passed around or not, but it's in the file of a letter from the LANC, from the chair, which I won't read the whole thing, but basically represents a motion that was made and passed by 20 yes, 0 no, 5 abstentions, that moves that the Department of Neighborhood and Power be granted the exclusive right to run neighborhood council elections and to be able to partner with other city departments as needed. And that was after a full discussion at this month's Lank meeting. And certainly the city departments, city clerk is at the top of the list. Let me just say that last year I was the independent election administrator for the Northeast San Fernando Valley and worked with the 8 neighborhood councils there, and also had the opportunity to either be a poll manager or go around the city and observe the various neighborhood council elections. And it's really clear to me that the language in your draft ordinance where it says the city clerk, with all due respect, should say Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. It's partly because there's complicated things dealing with the bylaws of neighborhood councils, and when they get presented with election procedure stipulation worksheets, which essentially override their bylaws temporarily for the purpose of conducting election, there is a need and a desire, and I think a track record from last year, that those decisions that are made are done with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment in charge. And that certainly also goes along with the election manual, which was also prepared by the department, and we'll have neighborhood council input this time. So that's my recommendation on the change for this ordinance before you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joanne?
Joanne Yavanik-Garb, West Hills Neighborhood Council. We brought before our council the Lank motion, and it was passed that we want the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to conduct the elections with the assistance of any other city department, and primarily it would be the city clerk. It seems that this election ran much smoother than the previous election, where the city clerk had conducted the election. And I'm a precinct officer. I'm the inspector for several precincts, and I know how to do a precinct election. And so based on what the city clerk has given us. But neighborhood councils are an entirely different beast. We have 4 legs, but we run a different method. And it was difficult to coordinate with the city clerk and with the department as to each neighborhood council's bylaws and what the issues were. I know in our neighborhood council, the election with the city clerk, we had a lot of people being disenfranchised because they could not prove that they belonged to a certain synagogue that was within the boundaries of West Hills. And they had come, and part of our definition of a stakeholder is if you worship in the neighborhood, and we had disenfranchised people coming in, and it wasn't that successful. This time, we had a lot of people show up. They didn't have to prove that they lived in our neighborhood, but they had to attest to a statement saying that I have the right to vote here because, and that worked very, very well for us.
Thank you.
Okay. Kathy Deladani, I'm here representing Jill Banks-Berard from the Valley Alliance, who chairs the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils. And in front of you, you have a letter from Jill. The Valley Alliance unanimously voted to recommend that the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment be the lead agency for the elections and partner with the city clerk's office. I myself currently, and I have been involved with neighborhood councils for over 10 years, and I'm currently president of the Tarzana Neighborhood Council. And we've done it all different ways. We started out, each neighborhood council would do their own election. Then gradually, it went to the city clerk's office. And last year, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment conducted it, and it was by far the best. It was well done. We had, just in our neighborhood council, we had more candidates than we've ever had. and everything went very smoothly. It was an exceptional job that they did. And so this is why the Valley Alliance and the other groups are recommending that they become the lead of the elections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Garcia?
Thank you. I experienced this time an election that was a celebration. It was a celebration because we all worked together towards something, as opposed to it wasn't a city election where we didn't know the candidate, but we liked the candidate. But this way, we had a personal feel here, and that's because the department worked so hard to put us all together. We banded together and we bought ads in newspapers that perhaps were like the East Valley or whatever it was, and it told about the date and where it was going to happen. We had 2 or 3 of these ads running prior, before the candidates, and then the time of the election. We did things differently and simply, and it turned out to be a great celebration. I too agree that it should be the department in charge. I think that the city clerk has a definite function. There's no doubt about that. But I don't want to see it, the method that we just went through, changed, not so soon, perhaps in the future, if things don't work out. But I think things are just fine the way that we just did them. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the department staff, city clerk, and an Office of Neighborhood Empowerment. And I can kind of set this up. I think what happened over the last couple of years is it's kind of traded back and forth between the city clerk, and then 12 or 13, we said, let's give it to Dunn to run because the city clerk was tied up in regular city elections. But the two of you came to this committee and recommended a course of action, I think, that's captured in this ordinance. And so if you can explain to us what your intent and what the specific responsibilities are for each operation, and who's in charge of the elections, and what parts of the elections you both play, I think it would clarify.
Holly Walcott, Office of Interim City Clerk. 2009 was the first year that the city clerk took on the neighborhood council elections, and the reason the city clerk took it on was it was a 9/12 commission recommendation, and prior to that, the department had spent...
9/12 commission.
Oh, the charter section that requires the neighborhood council to be reviewed every 10 years?
Seven.
First.
The first 7. Yeah. There was only one, under Charter Section 912, there was one review process set up for a neighborhood council commission that would review the system once it had been implemented. That commission is customarily referred to as the 912 Commission or the Neighborhood Council Review Commission, and Deputy City Attorney Darren Martinez.
Okay. And that commission is what prompted the city
right,
clerk
because
to be... Okay.
Prior to that, Dunn had spent a significant amount of time and resources doing individual elections. So in 2009, when the city clerk took them over, what we did was consolidate. And I think, consistent with each one of the speakers you've heard, that each year it's gotten better and better, and we've learned from the prior year. And also consistent with what the public speakers have said, that it became not cost-effective the last go-around for the city clerk to take them on, so Dunn did take them on for a lower cost and with a great deal of community support, using a lot of the format and procedures that the city clerk had established. So this year going in, we have worked together on what our strengths are, the city clerk's strengths, and personnel are good at the administrative portions, and we will be handling such things as candidate filing, vote by mail, supply development of ballots, signs, forms, voting booths, maps, boundaries. But the department, whose strengths are in actual the people, and the important part will actually be handled by the department. So the city clerk does not have any objection to changing this ordinance to have the department be the lead.
But you would stay in your role as
Yes.
providing service?
Absolutely, and we've been funded to do so and are committed to the process and supporting Dunn.
Gracie?
Gracie Liu, General Manager for the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. I just really want to quickly welcome Council Members Martinez and O'Farrell. Thank you very much for being on the committee. Looking forward to working with you both. Ms. Walcott has said is absolutely correct. The department was able to have such successful elections in 2012 because the city clerk did set an amazing foundation for us to build upon. I don't know if you remember, but there was no funding set aside for it in that fiscal year. So when we actually had the authority to conduct the elections, we had to do it pretty quickly. We literally had perhaps 4 to 5 months to prep for elections, and it was due to the city clerk's good work that we were able to actually successfully pull it off. So we would be focusing on the outreach portions of elections. We would focus with working on the independent election administrators, assisting them and in supporting the neighborhood councils in their election outreach. The day of election, we would be conducting those elections. We'd be tallying all the ballots, and we would be dealing with challenges. We thought that when we worked this out with the city clerk's office, that this was actually an excellent use of our collective strengths, and that it would result in even better elections in 2014 for the neighborhood councils.
Okay. But let me ask you, in the sense, Holly, when you mentioned that you would have no problem alternate, but in the initial page, it talks about that the two of you are going to jointly administer. So is that something that changes, or what is your perception when you say that you would support
I think we're going to jointly administer. I think what I'm hearing the neighborhood councils say is that what they want to hear is that Dunn is the lead and the lead administrator, and we don't have any problem with that. I don't think that our roles change significantly, but I think that the community would feel more comfortable if it were the department being named as the lead.
Let me ask the city attorney, is that more than a cosmetic change of the ordinance, or?
Yes, Deputy City Attorney Darren Martinez. I don't necessarily think we're looking at a change to an ordinance. One of the difficulties that we have with respect to this ordinance is that currently the system is that the authority to conduct elections has been given to the city clerk, period. When we dealt with the change in 2012, there was just a temporary administration to the department. Now we're dealing with a temporary solution again for 2014. So the ordinance is drafted in such a way to reflect the direction really we've been given, which was to allow the department and the city clerk to conduct it for 2014. The problem is kind of changing that in the whole scheme of things. So if we wanted to get direction that this would be a permanent change, it would be a little bit easier to draft the ordinance to create that the department will work with the city clerk. Otherwise, what we're dealing with is just kind of this little tiny piece for 2014, while still having to keep in perspective that we need to keep the regular authority that's been given to the city clerk, which we've only addressed 2014. So we have to be cognizant of leaving in place that ordinance as it existed before. I'm certainly open to any kind of suggestions if we have like some changes to language that we could do here, but it's more of a structural problem or difficulty with this ordinance in dealing with it.
Let me ask Gracie, are there other issues coming out of the commission that address election concerns?
There are. The main one, which I believe Commissioner Schaefer talked about, is just who should conduct elections. It doesn't get into the technicalities of the actual ordinance or deal with this matter. My understanding is, even if we proceed with this language, come 2014, we're going to have to come before the city council again and do another ordinance change to address the elections in 2016. So I think that the neighborhood councils, their wish is to just kind of handle it right now and just make whatever necessary changes, if possible, now that would address who is the lead administrator as well as the ongoing elections.
Okay. Let me head back to City Attorney. How long would it take to make those changes?
Well, I think that we need a little bit of time, obviously, but we can work quickly to get it done.
Right, we will begin, we've already begun organizing the neighborhood councils, but the actual ordinance change would need to occur, I don't know when you're comfortable with it, Holly?
We,
You're doing
elections-
outreach now?
Sorry?
You're doing outreach now for the 2014?
We're starting.
Elections, though, this year?
They're spring in 2014,
March
so
through
can-
May of 2014.
right, candidate filing will begin in December for the first region.
So by December.
So is that reasonable to expect to have an ordinance in place and approved and functional?
So are we talking about changing this one and then just making it a permanent change for all years? Oh, yeah, I think we can easily get that in place
I think
by,
it's pretty well agreed that the two departments should work together. I'm a little concerned on the motion that says that you kind of leave the word city clerk out and you just say any other city department. I think it's important that the city clerk's functions are still in the ordinance. So we clearly know who's doing what in the elections, but in changing, a permanent change as it relates to who is in authority to run the elections, is that something that could be done permanently before November?
let's maybe make the following recommendation. If you move it with the recommendation that be amended to include it, we can move this as is, and that way we can also try to get another draft prepared that would address a situation that would be a permanent change. So that way at council we're prepared to then move the other ordinance. We can try to work with you to get that ordinance in place. Basically having one in our pocket to show up and say, this is the temporary one, but if we can make it permanent, this is the other one that we can do.
Okay,
So
you could do that by the time it came to council?
how quick are you going to go to council on it?
Well, we'll have to work that out.
Let's work, we can work with your office in getting it done, and then we see where we go.
No, that's great. I think it's great. Everyone's on the same page here, so we
So-
just need to...
So let me have that wording again. We will approve this ordinance.
Yes, let's approve this ordinance to move forward. And then in addition, the committee has recommended that the change be more permanently implemented, and that you've requested our office in consultation with you to provide another alternative ordinance at the time it goes before council, so that we can address the situation once and for all, so that we don't have to come back again for 2016.
Okay. You got that? Okay, we'll move that, this item number 6, as amended by the text of the city attorney's comments. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item.
Item number 5 is a motion, Weezer Rosenthal, Library...
We want to hold 5 to the end.
Okay.
Let's get through these quickies, and then we can,
Okay.
because we have a number of cards for 5.
Okay. Item number 9 is a verbal status report from the city attorney and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment.
Now, did we do 7?
No.
That's 7.
Did we do 7 and 8? You jumped to 9. 7.
We just did 7.
No, we did.
Because we just finished.
Now we're going to do 7.
Yeah, 7.
Okay. Item number 7 is a verbal status report from the city attorney and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment General Manager pursuant to motion Weezer Parks and 2011-12 adopted budget recommendations and Board of Neighborhood Commissioners to report relative to recommendations for standardized a factual basis stakeholder definition, qualifications, and documentation.
Okay. Let me ask staff if you could sit in the front. Let me get the public cards out of the way, and then you can come back.
Okay.
We have Kathy Deladon, Mary Garcia, Rick Kodak, Tony Wilkerson. That's the first 4 speakers. Okay. Tony?
Tony Wilkinson, Panorama City. I filed an opposition card. I don't mean to be difficult on this, but the neighborhood councils in the process of reviewing this under the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners were responsive to the council's concerns and the public concerns about the factual basis stakeholder being a challenge. And there were 3 commission 3 subcommittees. 2 of those subcommittees recommended that the factual basis stakeholder not be a mandatory stakeholder class, that it be left up entirely to the neighborhood councils so that councils such as Panorama City that think it's just great could keep their factual basis stakeholders, and those that didn't want to have them wouldn't need to have them. We went to the Neighborhood Council Review Commission, the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners meeting, and all of a sudden, one of those things where you see this happening in the room and you don't know what happened. 2/3 came in saying we don't want a requirement, and it morphed into a resolution that you leave it in place and change the name. And change the name to something that now needs to be defined. Substantial and continuing interest, whatever that means. This only seeds another controversy. It hasn't been defined yet. If this is adopted, it'll have to be quickly defined before the next elections, and we'll have another mandated class that nobody quite understands what it is. So I think it should either just be left alone, or it should simply be removed as a mandated class and allow those councils who can deal with it and assign only 2 seats so it doesn't become a problem, and who like it because it enfranchises more people to run for the council, we can keep it.
Okay. Kathy Deladani, President of the Tarzana Neighborhood Council. In April, our board unanimously passed the following resolution in regards to the factual-based stakeholder. It was based on the recommendations of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. We said remove the requirement that neighborhood councils provide governing board positions for factual basis stakeholders, allow each neighborhood council to determine the number, if any, of governing board seats that be allocated to factual basis stakeholders, remove the current definition of factual basis stakeholder, and allow each neighborhood council to adopt its own definition of factual basis stakeholder. We have, I'll give you an example, since 2003 when we were certified, the Tarzana Neighborhood Council, we've actively dealt with the issue of factual-based stakeholders. From year to year, we carefully reviewed our policy in light of problems that other councils were having with takeovers by factual-based stakeholders. And in 2010, we voted to allocate 2 seats specifically for factual-based stakeholders. And our elections have run smoothly. We listened to our Tarzana community, and we feel that the process, our determination as a neighborhood council was very successful in this particular area. Thank you.
Yes, Mary Garcia again. President, Midtown North Hollywood Neighborhood Council. We've always had someone on the Neighborhood Council that was, you want to call it factual stakeholder. We called it community interest or at large, so it was nothing new to us. I was on the working group just recently. We probably spent 12 to 15 hours just on this word, factual stakeholder, because it means what to anyone? You would have 6 different meanings here. So in order to clarify this, I think we decided that each neighborhood council would make a decision on what that title is after lots and lots of hours. So we came to the conclusion that the missing word or the missing whatever it is to identify that seat should really be up to the stakeholder. But again, as I'm saying, we took a lot of time with this one word. So I think it should be up to the neighborhood councils. I think that we've already been there for a very long time, but we never had put a name to it as officially as was the intent earlier with factual stakeholder. We already had a name for it. So we want to just revert back, I feel, neighborhood councils to where we were in the beginning with already having that there. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just, Mr. Schaefer, Lynn Bailey, and Joanne Yannick Garb, next 3 speakers. Okay, Mr. Kohler.
Rick Kolka with Councilmember Weezar's office. Thank you, Chairman. Councilmembers O'Farrell and Martinez. And we appreciate your patience, Chairman, for allowing this to go through a pretty extensive community process, which we thought was very important. And we heard the feedback from the neighborhood councils. And we certainly, we're dealing with this in Eagle Rock when we had some outside interests trying to take over that particular election. And I think for us, and we discovered that the shoe doesn't fit every foot, right? So that we wanted to leave some openness for the individual neighborhood councils to define, let's say in Chatsworth, to have horse owners associations, right, or a seat, or somebody near the airport to have an airport seat, but also to shore up the definition as much as we can, given that you have to leave it somewhat open so they could define it for themselves. We're satisfied that that's occurred here. We'd like to see the motion move forward, and then it can come back if there's any administrative questions can be dealt with as well. But we think it has the input necessary, the safeguards necessary as much as we can. And if it needs to be tweaked later on, we can do that. But we certainly wanted to make sure we had the input for the neighborhood councils. They've given us their input. We agree with their findings, and we'd like to move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer.
Yes, Leonard Schaefer again, Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. I was a member of the Neighborhood Council Review Commission where the original factual basis stakeholder was recommended. I was one of those that originally objected to it. We have seen some of the problems that arose. I know that Councilmember Parks is well aware of the history. Councilmember O'Farrell and Councilmember Martinez, perhaps not. But because of some things that had happened, Councilmember Huizar put forth a motion with regards to factual basis. And the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, when we put together our working groups, felt that this was a subject that should be brought up early on and worked on early on, which we did. And then when we had our joint working group sessions at the May 25th session, a motion was made by the chair of the Valley Alliance, Jill Barad, with regards to replacing factual basis with a community interest stakeholder, and that would be one that has a substantial and ongoing participation in the community. There were two attempts to amend that and to allow neighborhood councils to define their own, both of which were defeated. The motion was finally passed with 28 yes and 6 no votes amongst the working groups. And once again, these are from all over the city. I believe you have a letter that was submitted by the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners dated June 6th, where we took this up, recommending a motion that the factual basis definition be removed from the ordinance and from the plan, and a substitution of community interest stakeholder with substantial and ongoing interest. We would be relying on the city attorney to go through what I'm sure are an abundance of cases that would define the word substantial and the word ongoing to help the department, the commission, and neighborhood councils with that definition. We are asking that this go forward, and as a representative of the commission, that is my recommendation that the ordinance and the plan both be amended to incorporate this community interest stakeholder.
Thank you.
Glenn Bailey, again, good afternoon, committee members. First of all, let me just advise you, I am president of the Encino Neighborhood Council, and the Board of the Encino Neighborhood Council did vote to support the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners' 4 recommendations as described earlier. However, this motion from Councilmember Huizar came out after that consideration. So my comments now are my own and not on behalf of the Neighborhood Council. But having reviewed what Councilmember Huizar put down, I think he captured the discussion of the NC plan review. I think he captured the concerns that had come out and expressed. So I think he got 90% of it, and I think that it's good to go. I think it should move forward. There's a couple of points in here I just wanted to emphasize. First of all, Encino as one of the neighborhood councils, it had the largest number of factual-based stakeholders voting of all the neighborhood councils in the valley. I think we were number 3 in the city. And we actually encourage folks who don't live or work or own property, but they need to have more than just a Starbucks receipt. And that's been one of the issues. I mean, every neighborhood council that had issues, it wasn't Starbucks, it wasn't, I mean, Eagle Walk had a different situation, Pico had a different situation. But the fact is, it was abusive, because people need to have some sort of tie to the community, whether it's going to school or church or being a volunteer or whatever it is. But it's not just stopping and buying something and having that receipt to show. So, and that's what I witnessed as being a poll manager at one of the neighborhood councils, and people were even trying to share the receipts. They weren't even getting their own receipts. So I think this will go a long way in improving that situation. I do urge you to move it forward. Thank you.
Joanne Yavanik, Garb, West Hills Neighborhood Council. We've not had a problem. We've not had contentious elections where we've had to determine who was a factual basis stakeholder and who wasn't. We've had one factual basis stakeholder on our board for about the past 10 years. And it's not been a problem for us. We really need to have somebody as opposed to the Starbucks, come in and say, I have a vested interest in this community, and this is my vested interest. And it's kind of difficult to prove, but yet it could be very easy to prove. It's just a matter of the verbiage, that you want to have the freedom to do your own thing, and each neighborhood council is different, and our definition of a factual-based stakeholder might be a little different than others, but for the most part, we want somebody who has a definite community interest. So that's where we stand. Thank you.
Let me just make sure, we have staff come up. One of the things, maybe you could walk us through, there appears to be 2 or 3 different documents. We have a letter from the president of the commission. We have the motion, and just want to get clarity as to exactly what we're attempting to do in the sense of changing the ordinance. If, this is the one thing that I think is the frustration for many that have been involved with neighborhood councils. After 10 years, we're still trying to figure out who's a member. And it just seems as though if we could ever get past that, we actually might get some work done. So if you kind of walk us through the combination of the motion and the letter and the wording that we're actually looking to capture.
Sure. Gracie Liu, General Manager, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, and I'm here joined by staff Joseph Hari, who's our Policy Director. So it's basic in the sense that when the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners decided to have the plan review look at this, they ultimately came up with a motion that it's just to take out the factual basis language. So it's still live, work, own property, but then they would substitute it with the community interest stakeholder, and they define that as a person who affirms a substantial and ongoing participation within the neighborhood council boundaries and who may be in a community organization such as, but not limited to, educational, nonprofit, and or religious. So that was a basic motion coming from the commission. And Councilmember Huizar's motion does have the same language. They did add just some additional information, in particular item number D, which they were concerned with, that when we actually get the documentation at the elections, that we would make sure that the standard for that documentation or the affirmation of the stakeholder type would be the same across the board. So if it was a community interest stakeholder that needed some type of documentation, it would be at the level that a live, work, own property would have as well in terms of equity issues. And that's in essence the addition that was included from the Commission's main motion. And I don't know, Joe, if you want to add anything to that.
Joseph Hari, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. The process that this letter from the Commission has gone through started back in December when the Commission decided to look at the Neighborhood Council plan, so look at many different ordinances. And this was the first one that they tackled. And so they had 3 regions throughout the city, and they looked at these questions. They brought it to the Commission. The Commission came up with a definition. Then it went out to the community, so there was extensive surveying. Neighborhood councils had an opportunity to weigh in. It came back to the Commission. They sent it back to the committee again, a motion, and then finally to the Commission again. So it was a very exhaustive process, a lot of input on it. The issue, the genesis of this from the Huizar motion is back last summer when Eagle Rock had their elections, and there were a number of folks who came out and with a receipt, they basically said, we have a stake in the community, so we should be able to vote, and they were able to vote. And so this definition, by saying that substantial and ongoing, it gives the department the ability to narrow that. And so it doesn't define in this definition, it doesn't say, this yes, this no, this yes, this no. And one of the reasons that I think the department is supportive of this is because when we did an analysis of the 95 neighborhood councils, we saw that the majority of them, over 50, 60, 70%, either had factual basis stakeholders or positions where they could vote, factual basis stakeholders could. So in order to not micromanage, this flexibility, it does provide flexibility, but what we believe is that it will still give the department the tool to narrow it down to a sufficient place.
Okay. Let me just see if you have any more questions. Okay. Let me see if I can capture it in words that are sitting in front of me, is that we're going to instruct the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance amending LAMC section regarding membership in the neighborhood council substantially as follows. A, neighborhood council's membership will be open to everyone who lives, works, owns property in the neighborhood, and also to those who declare a stake in the neighborhood as a community interest stakeholder and affirms of substantial and ongoing participation within the neighborhood council boundaries, and who may be in the community organizations such as, but not limited to, educational, nonprofit, and/or religious. B, remove the requirement that neighborhood council provide a governing board position reserved for community interest stakeholder, provided there is an at-large position of which all stakeholders can vote and run for. Allow each neighborhood council to determine the number of governing board seats that will be allocated to the community interest stakeholders. D, require that the affirmation of those community interest stakeholders proposed in the neighborhood council bylaws be consistent with and equal to those administered by those who live, work, or own property. And E, define own property as meaning real estate property. Does that capture it?
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
So I'd ask that we move that definition and request the city attorney to make those changes to the LAMC code.
Yes, also in addition to prepare the resolution, there is Deputy City Attorney Darren Martinez, there is one comment, though, that I do want to make and clarify about this proposed ordinance, in that the term factual basis stakeholders, it's a little bit, it's what's kind of developed out of what the current definition is. The definitions live, work, or own property, and those people who affirm a factual basis in a community. So we typically refer to those latter part of stakeholders as the factual basis stakeholders. But that can include a large group of people. That can include include the youth organization, the church organization, where the concern that's arisen has been with the voters who have showed up and had that single Starbucks receipt and attempted to vote. I do want to make clear, however, that this current definition is not going to eliminate the people who are Starbucks drinkers from being stakeholders in a community. It's just going to increase the standard of proof which they demonstrate their interest in a community. So if they are that person who goes to the Starbucks across town, substantial on an ongoing continuous basis, they are going to still continue to be stakeholders. Similarly, with people that go to a restaurant or the ongoing clients in a restaurant, that is covered in here. Because I did hear a lot of comments about people saying, we don't want the Starbucks drinker to be the stakeholder, and I don't want any kind of misperceptions to arise from what this language is here as opposed to maybe what's being discussed with the audience and community.
Let me just ask one thing. I thought when we used the term substantial, that it was more than having a casual cup of coffee, and that was part of the definition and the documentation that's required, that there's substantial involvement.
If we want to clarify that it's not going to be the purchase of consumer goods, and I don't know that that's true, I don't think that that's the direction we're going, then we need to say that in here. Otherwise this definition is broad enough to include that. You couldn't say that it's excluded under the current definition.
But let me ask you this, on the sense of substantial, not that you'd eliminate totally people that purchase goods, but they'd have to purchase them routinely.
Yes.
Not just the day of the election that show up with the Starbucks.
Correct. So that's why I said that the standard of proof that you go regularly to that Starbucks on the corner is going to be more stringent, but it's not going to eliminate you from being a stakeholder just because you go to Starbucks.
Yeah.
But wouldn't this give the individual neighborhood councils the opportunity to define that burden of proof to a greater degree, so that what happened in Eagle Rock last year couldn't happen again? Right? Isn't that what we're really
Yes, it would allow, and we're working with city attorney right now to see if there's any case law or other legal authority that would further help us define substantial and ongoing, those three words. And if I can get a definition, then that would allow me to, during the administration of the elections, require beyond just the receipt. Like, for instance, we're looking at if you really are that substantial ongoing type of customer, that the business would actually issue you a letter making that statement, so that we would take something that is definitely more substantive than just a receipt from that day.
Okay. Yeah, so if I may, Rick, that's what we're after, right? We're after enabling the neighborhood councils to enact a greater burden of proof, so that you can't do a drive-by, get a Starbucks cup of coffee, and vote because an organization that you belong to told you to do so, right? So that would enable neighborhood councils to further define, for their own purposes legally, with their bylaws, what constitutes a voter.
Right, and as I understand it, they can do that in their bylaws anyway. They can, and so this will give them a better framework to do that. But you're right. We have found, from anecdotal, that evidence wasn't that somebody showed up with, here's my 20 receipts from the Starbucks. It was, here's my one receipt and it has today's date on it. Mm-hmm. So while we won't capture everything, we'll capture most situations. And I think the city attorney working on kind of further defining, or at least have case law so that we can, once we get to election, we can feel comfortable as a city. We can include this and this, we can make an argument that this is not included. So we think it goes far enough, as far as we can go, without defining. The only other way to do it is to define in every situation what it is, and we're not going to be able to do that. Each neighborhood is as different as, our neighborhoods are as different as cities thousands of miles apart, right? So we want to leave those neighborhoods with that opportunity for their own distinctions.
No, I just want to relate one thing to the city attorney, is that when we look at the wording and it talks about person who affirms of substantial and ongoing participation within the neighborhood council boundaries and who may be in a community organization such as a not limited to education, nonprofit, or religious, the fact that you are in a substantial, ongoing, and maybe a part of a community organization seems to take out the person that just shops. Because I don't know what organization you'd belong to unless you were a SAM Club member or something.
And this was an issue that was discussed and brought up. The modifier, the last part that says, it modifies it, and who may is permissive, may be in a community organization. So you can't look at just the community organization. It's just, as a community interest stakeholder and affirms a substantial and ongoing participation within the neighborhood council boundaries. So a community interest could plausibly be somebody who's a routine customer of a business. And if it's substantial and ongoing, they would thus fall within the criteria where they would be an allowable stakeholder. Now, some of the concerns that this was an issue that was brought up and was discussed, and there were a number of businesses that did want to include this within the neighborhood council world. They wanted their stakeholders who attend their business to also be able to vote. So it wasn't simply a matter of we're not excluding people who just buy things from the definition that's proposed. We're increasing that burden of proof to show that, I regularly go to a restaurant over on the west side every week, and that business is going to send a letter to the department that indicates, he's here eating all the time. And we know that that's the substantial and ongoing. But if we want to clarify that this is something we're going to cut out, then obviously this language must be modified.
Well, let me just say this. I would, again, I'd probably look at it more narrowly than that, but I would think when you say ongoing participation in the neighborhood council, that I would believe that meant that you're actively participating in the business of the neighborhood council or the furtherance of the neighborhood council, not that I drive through because it's the easiest way to get to the freeway, I get gas at the intersection. I don't believe that's what participation is. And I think it's a matter of interpretation, but that's what I would look at it much more narrowly.
But it does say participation within the neighborhood council boundaries.
Right.
So it's not just the neighborhood council, it's
I'm saying
anything that you're involved in.
But I think what I perceive participation to mean is you have an active involvement in something active involvement in the community. You're just not driving through and making a purchase. You're actively involved, and that's why they say you may be, but not limited to educational, nonprofit, or religious, which gives some substance that you're talking about meaningful organizations, as opposed to giving examples of meaningful organizations, and that you have a participation in the betterment or the involvement in that, within those boundaries. That's what I would perceive we're trying to get.
But no, I understand. But so I want to make it clear so that there's not any misperception. Is the breadth of this reading can encompass something that you may have a very different idea from. So I do want to bring up those concerns so that if there is a necessary adjustment that maybe should be made to this language, that it's discussed and done.
I don't have any words to substitute. And I think it's up to the neighborhood council to do some interpretation, but I would think the reason you go to neighborhood council meetings is to actively participate in the betterment of the community, and you're showing that by your participation in a variety of ways, that you just, like I said, you're just not driving through, you're not driving by, you're not stopping and saying, well, this is my favorite coffee spot. You're actually participating. That's what I would think it is.
Under this definition as proposed, it would allow that person that is regularly going to the Starbucks to obtain a letter from the Starbucks and say, they're my ongoing client or customer, and that would establish their substantial and ongoing involvement in the community.
I think we have to remember what caused this to all generate. The people that were generating the interest from their customers a couple of years ago had to do with your marijuana dispensaries, and I think that's what the whole issue started from, is how do you make a policy decision that requires something above that I just go to a place and buy a product and I have no other involvement or participation in the community.
So if we want to exclude this, this is something then that should be added to the language to clarify it. If we're going to exclude the purchase of consumer goods from it, then the recommendation, we should specifically say that. But the feedback from the neighborhood council so far has been not to do that. Because there was the desire that people want their business customers to also be stakeholders, those people that come in to buy things from their business to be stakeholders. So there's this turmoil within the system in trying to figure out and how to articulate exactly who that person is while, respecting all the different points of view out there.
Let me ask Mr. Cooper, is Mr. Weezar's intent was to narrow the issue of individuals that just trade at a certain location, or that active participation was actually going to be a requirement, or what was the intent of the motion, or what he was trying to get to?
I mean, it's both. I mean, active participation and trying to define, because it certainly wasn't the only instance. We've had other instances where, some union members were trying to infiltrate a particular election in another cause or some construction project of some sort. So we're trying to make sure we had a clearer definition, and I emphasize clearer, and it's not perfect. We weren't necessarily looking to, I wouldn't say it was about narrowing the definition, it's just clarifying the definition as much as we can. And while Darren, says that this would include some people who might be customers at a particular business on an ongoing basis, we might find in some council districts or some council seats that is okay, and clearly I think it was, because through the neighborhood council regional meetings, I'm sure it came up, right, and I'm sure they talked about it. But for us, and even in the Eagle Rock situation, you had other abuses going on where people were offering $40 to just show up for that day, and it was in the sort of classic Starbucks stakeholder on that day. They weren't even necessarily customers of any particular businesses in Eagle Rock. They were people who came from outside of the district with some receipt from some other place, and using that as a basis to vote, and they could, given our current definition. So I think we would want to err on the side of leaving some room. Again, we could always come back and give more authority or more clear definition. We don't want to inadvertently keep people out by adding language to limit it further. I mean, the dilemma the neighborhood councils have is that they're both a governmental body and a community group. And so these two things are battling, and as the governmental body, we're trying to help them clarify so that their elections are free of fraud. They receive governmental money. We want to make sure that that's the case. But we also want to try to keep in that community sort of activism role that they enjoy, and to encourage that as much as possible. So we're okay with it. We realize that it's not a foolproof situation, but we know it's better.
Okay, my only concern is that I would hate the 2014 to get here, and we have a rash of motions saying it wasn't the marijuana and the union issue this time. It's something else that people found a way to stuff the ballot ballots. And it seems as though if we're just substituting one term for another, and without giving more clarity, that we've not maybe put ourselves in a better position than we at least thought we were when we were moving forward.
Sure. I think if we, get back some of that administrative advice from the city attorney or case law that says, here's what substantial and ongoing has meant in other, legal jurisdictions, that gives us, that shores us up further, because then we say, okay, well, you're clearly not that. You can't vote. Or, you get to vote and then you vote, I think how it works is they would be allowed, everybody's allowed to vote, and then you go back and check it later. But I think the case law might actually help us shore up.
Is that forthcoming, case law or language?
Yeah, we we will be researching and providing the department with advice on this. Largely, it is going to come down to the department's adoptions of regulations and how they interpret and how they apply this term. So there is a lot of discretion that's provided to the department in administratively interpreting what this provision means.
But that's got to be based on some kind of legal basis.
It is, and we will provide the department with that basis.
This is a framework that we have to put some substance to the framework as time moves on.
The department will be doing that, or, the department in conjunction with the city clerk, whoever is administering the elections, because they will have to have the regulations that will help them interpret or decide what standards are required in order for people to cast a ballot.
All right, we'll move the item with the verbal amendments that I provided earlier, and we'll ask the department to come back as they refine and create their particular administrative oversight over the elections.
We'd be happy to do that.
All right, so we'll move that. Okay, next item.
Item number 8, adopted budget recommendation relative to an instruction to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to report on other forms of neighborhood councils that exist around the world, and for the report to address what best practices can be applied in Los Angeles pursuant to adoption of the mayor's 2013-14 budget on May 23, 2013.
We have Joanne. Want to pass? Okay, all I'd ask on this item, can you do the worldwide search in 30 days?
Thank you. Item number 9.
No, I'm saying number 8. Can you do, they asked in 30-day report back. Can you do that in 30 days? Is that reasonable?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
We can do that.
We have an item for you if you want to look at that, or,
Okay.
so we have a preliminary.
All right. So I just want to make sure that with all the other things that you're doing,
Sure.
that we not give you an unreasonable due date.
Wonderful. Thank
Whenever
you.
somebody says around the world, it gives me an idea. It's a little.
Yeah, it is challenging. We did, and I did ask Joe Hari to work on this, and he is looking at the ones in the U.S. There are not that many in worldwide, except for Nagoya, which they actually came to the department to learn about their system and our system, and then they subsequently copied it in Nagoya, Japan. But we've had over 20 countries come to the department to learn about neighbor councils, and with their hopes that they will someday have that happen in their countries. But currently, the only models that we see right now that are similar are in the United States. And I don't know, Joe, if you want to speak more to this.
Right. If we could hold this at committee for 30 days, and when the report comes, we can send it to council.
Sure, we could do that.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is adopted budget recommendation relative to an instruction to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to report on how to address the equity of funding between neighborhood councils, between neighbors considering the desperate level of resources available to communities, pursuant to adoption of the mayor's 2013-14 budget on May 23, 2013.
Joanne?
Joanne Yvanek, Garb West Hills Neighborhood Council. I don't know how you would be able to determine whether this council gets $45,000 and this council gets $25,000 based on need. Every community has needs. We're not in a short supply of people coming to us and asking us for money. And there are things that we can do with the money. So I don't know how you could determine it. You couldn't say, well, in West Hills, you don't really have that much, but we pay more in property taxes than somebody in another community. So it kind of, it matches out in the end. It evens out. So I don't know how you would be able to say to one community, you deserve X amount of dollars, and you don't deserve, to another community, you don't deserve that much because you're a wealthier neighborhood, or you're this, or you're that. So I don't think that it would come into the play of fairness to each community. We're all important, and we all have needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, you want to give us an overview of this motion? I think Ms. Perry did a motion, and I think it came out of the budget process also.
That's correct. Last fiscal year, Councilmember Perry did ask the department to look at issues with equity in funding, particularly in the areas of South LA, where some of the neighborhood councils struggle a little more with socioeconomic issues, public safety, and seeing if just providing more funding would actually help, level the playing field for these neighborhood councils that often struggle with just basics such as quorum and just simple meeting operations. We did propose that there could be funding could be added into not only South LA areas, but areas where there are more struggles, such as East LA and the Northeast Valley areas, where perhaps there is language issues that along with the socioeconomic issues that are effect. And ultimately, we still need to work on this some more. There needs to be some basic levels of measurement. What are we measuring when we look at neighborhood councils and how functional they are? And what are the various factors that affect this functionality? And so for us, it's not a matter of just simply throwing more money at a neighborhood council who may not even be able to have quorum to even vote on an item. It's more of, how do we raise equity levels by providing funding to address the factors that play into functionality as opposed to just handing over money to a neighborhood council. And Joe has been speaking with South Los Angeles Alliance neighborhood councils on this matter as well. So I'll let him kind of fill you in on that.
To repeat what Gracie was saying in terms of, there are disparities in resources in different communities. The question is, does that impact the neighborhood councils in those communities as far as achieving their mission, which is to increase participation and to make government more responsive to local needs? So along those ends, the department is not looking at just throwing out additional money or suggesting that. Really looking at it, and how do you measure how neighborhood councils are doing? So one way that the department is considering is looking at the community impact statements, for example. So what parts of the city do community impact statements most get generated from? If in certain regions, such as South LA, if that is not happening, to take a look at that and see, are there resource issues? For example, technology. One of the things that the department is really looking at is, how we communicate to folks. We're doing more and more on the internet. Maybe there are equity issues as far as what resources people have or how comfortable they are working with technology in certain parts of the community. Language may be another issue. If there's a largely Latino or any other ethnicity, that may be another issue as far as equity goes. So we're looking at all of that. This would be a longer process. It's an important issue, but it's a difficult issue. So.
No, I think it's great that you're looking into this. And it's not about the same amount of money to all the neighborhood councils. I realize that. I mean, even in my own district, I think we have the smallest one, and that's the Elysian Valley Riverside Neighborhood Council, 7,000 constituents. And they get the same amount of funding that, for example, Highland Park has, which I think has 60,000 constituents. So it's a very modest sum of money, no matter what neighborhood council you apply it to. So it's a larger issue of resources and real empowerment and what more can we do. So I think it's a really great avenue to explore. So I look forward to hearing more about this in terms of resources. And we're exploring free Wi-Fi as well on the Innovation Technology Committee. So there are different approaches in different committees, different bodies looking after this as well.
A couple of things just as you do your study. I think that one of the things that would be helpful to me is when you do your study, you figure out as you assess what neighborhood councils are doing, how well they're using their existing funds. Right. That would be primary to see where we are. I would think we would create a firestorm if we started figuring out we're going to take 20% from you and give 20% to someone else.
Right.
I think that is a showstopper from the beginning. Right. But I think that when we look at the poverty map and things of that nature in the city, we're finding larger portions of our communities are in the poverty map. But those issues are supposed to be resolved by block grant money and a variety of other programming, not necessarily the neighborhood council. And if, with the small amount of money that's being given to neighborhood councils, if it changed dramatically the wealth factor or the poverty factor in the community, then we're using the wrong system for block grant. I mean, so I think, and then the last one I'll mention is that I'd hate that we'd end up finding a system that bypassed or circumvented the rollover policy. That all of a sudden we have rollovers because people didn't use it, and then we say, well, let's stop the rollover policy and let's pull it into a pot or something and redistribute it. Then you have 97 or 99 neighborhood councils saying, me too, me too, me too. Right. And so I just think that it's very, very, it's good to look at, but I don't know whether there's a solution when you're dealing with, $40,000
Right.
per neighborhood council. So
Another issue, another factor that may play into it is as far as trainings. That may be an issue that the department looks at is are there additional trainings in certain parts of the community that would be helpful? But that obviously would take more personnel, staff, and that sort of thing. So there are different ways of looking at it, yeah.
And when we talked about it during the election process with Gracie, that, everybody's talking about outreach. And from my perception, outreach is a yearly, daily thing, because the couple of meetings that I attended where you have just the board there and no one else, there's a problem with the outreach. And if you basically have those kind of meetings all year long, we shouldn't be shocked that no one shows up for election.
Right.
So that's the thing I think we look at.
Another quick suggestion is when you report back, will you come back with a chart or a graph that has a comparison of the existing resources per neighborhood council, or at least just a snapshot?
Sure. The regionally, we'll do our very best. Getting the data for the neighborhood council boundaries may be challenging, but the general areas we can do that.
I think it would be also important, and I don't know if anybody has these kind of records, but cumulatively, not just that year of how the money was used, but cumulatively, have they had building blocks to use it to support what they've done in the past, or does it look like a shotgun that we just have people show up and say, I want this year, that year, and there's no collective or cohesion in the use of the funds?
I just did want to clarify, Councilmember O'Farrell, that you just mean the monetary resources. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Existing resources?
Or maybe even beyond, depending on what you're going to look at. I mean, you could take census data, you could take income level.
Yes. Okay.
Take a look at a few of the census decades and just kind of get a picture that could inform a way forward.
Be happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll hold this in committee until the report, and I think the commission says 60 days. So you're going to do a worldwide report in 30 days.
And we're going to solve socioeconomic issues in 60 days.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go to item...
Thank you.
Item number 5.
Item number 5 is the motion, Weezer Rosenthal, and Library Department report, and the June 18, 2013 Education Neighbors Committee report relative to the installation of signs identifying the existing community of Rose Hills and clarifications on the letter submitted by the librarian Glenn Creason in reference to historical maps containing points of interest that bears the affiliation of Rose Hill and Rose Hill.
Thank you. We have a number of cards. We're going to, because we've had a hearing on this prior, we're going to go to 1 minute on each card. We're going to go opposition first. And we have George Garcia, Teresa Mejia, Esther Hernandez, Cecilia Hurd. Can we have those four come up at this time? Are they here?
Yes, I'm Jorge.
Let me go over the other three names. We have George Garcia, Teresa Mejia, Esther Hernandez, Cecilia Hurd. If you come up to the table. Do we need an interpreter for anyone?
No, we're waiting. They stepped out to the restroom.
Okay. And the next group that will be coming up is Jose Mejia, Eric Sandoval, Camila Reyes, and Veronica Rodriguez. That's the next group. Okay. Why don't you start here to the right?
My right. Okay, you're right. Okay. Hi, I'm Jorge Garcia. I'm here opposing this motion. And the reason behind my opposition is because there's no historical evidence that states that Rose Hills has ever existed. I have maps here from Mr. Kaysen, which is a reference guide at the library of LA Library, and it's used as a reference guide. And also have here another paper written by Professor John R. Chavez, Southern Quarterly, Southern California Society, also a documented paper. And these two papers show that the community of El Terreno has always existed in this area. And what is trying to be used is this Rose Hills, they're trying to say that Rosa de Castilla is Rose Hills. It doesn't translate to Rose Hills. It never has. The Arroyo Rosa de Castilla was not even close to where they're saying it is. If you see the annexation of 1915 and 1912 created El Sereno. This part.
You've given us that information?
Okay, right. So, and within that annexation, there's a little area called Rose Hill. That's part of El Sereno. That's the area that they want to make into Rose Hills and take over a larger part. But they have no boundaries. They have no evidence of ever having existed. So we want this to go to the renaming process of the city clerk's office, where it's more time. There'll be more time to go through the evidence.
Time is expired now.
And the community will have a chance to have input on this.
Okay, thank you. Teresa?
Okay. Hi, I have 450 plus signatures that are opposed to this motion.
Teresa, bring the mic up so we can hear you. They're recording it.
Sorry. I have 450 plus signatures that are opposed to this motion, more than those who support. If there is an official name change, then they should go through the renaming process for community participation. I also have a letter here from my mom who was not able to come, but she says, I strongly oppose the name change of our cherished community, Rose Hill, to Rose Hills. I also oppose changing the name of our church, Our Lady of Guadalupe Rose Hill, to Rose Hills. I am the third generation that calls this community home. I grew up in Hillside Village, and I attend the local schools, Multnomah Elementary, El Sereno Junior High, and Wilson High School. For the past 20 years, my husband and I have raised a family in this community. We have always known it to be Rose Hill. 3 generations of my family have been parishioners of Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, Rose Hill. My children are 4th, making my grandson the 5th generation to attend Mass at Our Lady of Guadalupe, Rose Hill. My oldest son attended the school there and learned more about his faith. He was enrolled in the after-school program at the Rose Hill Park and Community Recreation Center.
Okay, thank you. Esther Hernandez?
I'm against having a name change from to Rose Hills. We've always known it as Rose Hill, singular.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hurd?
I, too, do not think it should be changed. I've lived in the community for over 50 years, and it's always been Rose Hill.
Right, thank you. Next group of speakers, if we could have those seats. Jose Mejia, Eric Sandoval, Camila Reyes. What's your name?
Veronica Rodriguez. Veronica Rodriguez.
Veronica?
Veronica.
Very good. Okay, why don't you start, Veronica?
Okay. I'm opposing this motion. There is no community of Rose Hills recognized by the city of LA. Rose Hill is an area of Osarino. There was one sign of Rose Hills and it was removed, most likely because of the misspell. The city allows a one-block destination sign, and that was what they had with the misspelled. We had documents from LA Dot. We have documents from LA Dot for the location of this so-called, missing vandalized signs, and these documents are no record of community signs and these locations that they claim they had. They are trying to rename part of our community without going through the process. I'm submitting these documents from LA Dot as evidence that there was no community signs at the requested locations. I also have this picture on one sign on Mercury taken down because of the misspelled. It was only installed because the one block destination allowed, and the sign is not on Mercury and Reynolds, as the motion indicates.
Thank you. You have material to give us?
Yes.
Get to the sergeant there. Thank you. You, Ms. Reyes?
I disagree with this motion. There is, again, no community of Rose Hills. It is Rose Hills singular, so please keep it that way. And this is a picture just of all the signs surrounding the community, the area of Rose Hill within the community of El Sereno, where it all states Rose Hill. And it's the church. I have a flyer from the church, and it's Rose Hill. There is no such Rose Hills.
Before, we have two other speakers come up, David Alanco and Genevieve Granados. Okay, Mr. Mejia.
Hi, my name is Jose Mejia, and I'm totally opposed against this motion. I've lived in the community for 25 years. I've coached in the community, Rose Hill Park. I go to the Our Lady of Guadalupe. I attend worship there, Our Lady of Guadalupe Catholic Church. And this is my grandson, which is fifth generation, also Rose Hill, member of the community.
Eric?
My name is Eric, and I'm opposed to the following motion. I have evidence to show that Rose Hill has always been called Rose Hill and is included in the boundary of present-day El Sereno. I have evidence to give you guys. That's all.
Is that it, Eric?
That's all.
Okay. Genevieve?
My name is Genevieve Granados. I physically was born in the community of Rose Hill. By eminent domain, we had to leave because they were building a sports park there. And I have a documentation here that it was called Rose Hill Sports Park. I've lived there. I've been part of the community for over 68 years. The Our Lady of Guadalupe Church is called Our Lady of Guadalupe Rose Hill, and it's registered at the Archdiocese as so. There's a recreation park that is Rose Hill. The projects that are there are Rose Hill and this park, so I can't see why they're saying that it's always been Rose Hills when it's not. Thank you.
All right, David, let me ask also Clemencia Lopez, Arturo Rodriguez, and Guadalupe Rodriguez. Okay, David, you're next.
Yo no sé hablar inglés, pero no estoy de acuerdo a lo que...
Yes, would you do that for us? Thank you.
No estoy de acuerdo.
He's saying that he's not he's opposing the motion.
Yo no sé hablar inglés, pero...
Have him
Doesn't speak English, but...
in the mic so that we can record it.
Yo no estoy de acuerdo a lo que dicen, ¿eh?
He doesn't agree with what they're saying about changing the name. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blanco.
Yeah.
Okay. Clemencia.
Sí.
Next.
En español se la voy a decir. Nada más, o sea, estoy en contra.
Hold on just a minute. Could you interpret for us?
She's going.
Hi, Jolie Garcia. She would like to share that she is against.
Estoy en contra y pues quiero que quede todo como está ahorita, que siga todo igual.
She is against it, and she would like for it just to stay the way it is now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Arturo?
Yeah, my name is Arturo Rodriguez, and I oppose this motion because changing the name by adding an S is renaming. The same as renaming, because living on a hill is not the same as living on the hills. Much like believing in God is not the same as believing in gods. Adding an S changes the meaning of the word, and it also changes the name of the community. We don't want to change this because it's not the same thing, and because the small group does not speak for the majority of the residents. I would like for it to be to make sure the proper process is followed, and so that all the constituents of our community are fairly represented and respected. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez? The last speaker on the cards is Jolie Garcia.
I will be helping their translation.
Thank you.
Mi nombre es Guadalupe Rodríguez y vine a decir que estoy en contra también de que se haga eso.
My name is Guadalupe Rodriguez, and she came over to say she's against this motion.
Prefiero que se quede así singular como está.
And he wants to keep it without the S, singular.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon to all of you. I'm Jolie Garcia, founding member of the El Sereno Historical Society. A minute is simply not enough time to point out all the discrepancies of Motion 11-2057 and the contradicting evidence presented by its supporters, but I would like to state that there has been a lack of transparency. I've requested at the last committee meeting, June 18, ICPR 8, the boundaries of Rose Hills, and also when Rose Hills was officially recognized by the city. All I was given was the file that was submitted by the group of supporters, yet I still don't know the boundaries. We don't know the boundaries. They have changed. They have requested signs at different locations. The locations have changed. I would still like that clarified. I would specifically like the boundaries of this community and when it was officially recognized. It has never been Rose Hills. Also, I want to point out there's strong opposition. We submitted a petition with over 450 signatures. That was collected. We just started collecting in June 23rd. It has taken them years to collect the signatures that they have, and it's less than what we have. Please have them go through the renaming process. Why is it that they're using, why is it so much work just to replace signs? It's something wrong.
Thank you very much. Now we have a number of cards for those that are supportive. We'll start off with Eric Martel, Lupe Mendoza. Okay. Okay. Eric, you're last. Okay. Lupe Mendoza, Elena Ching, Esther Hetzkar, Hump Chin. Those are the four. Okay. Go first.
Oh, yes, good afternoon. My name is Lupe Mendoza, and I'm here to support the motion to keep our name Rose Hills. We're a very small community. I've been a resident since 1972. We go to Our Lady Guadalupe Church. We've always been very involved in our community. I live up on the hill, and there's not one house. It's many houses. It's a big old hill. Many people live up there, and it's called Rose Hills. And I don't want to compare it, but it's like wanting to change Olvera Street to another name. I'm sorry, historically speaking, we are very proud to be from Rose Hills, and I cannot see it. We have a very united community. It's small, but we're very proud. We're very active, and that's why we're all here to support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Bernard Parks. This is my second time to come over here. And also the council members, I would like to thank you all.
Please
And
give us your name.
my name is Elena Ching, and I live in the community of Rose Hills for 35 years. And I'm so proud that this thing is going through, and I came here to support the motion of our councilman. I'm a product of the redistricting, and I would like to see that our community be recognized. We are not doing any changes. The church is still Rose Hill, the recreation park still Rose Hill, the historic Rose Hills community has to have the same opportunity just like the others. I got this, as I mentioned last time, from our councilman. El Sereno has their sign. Hermon community has their sign. Hillside Village has their sign. Monterey Hills, as well as University Hill, has their sign, except Rose Hills. And it says here on the flyer, Rose Hills.
Thank you.
It doesn't matter whether it's Rose Hill or Rose Hills. I think it's the same thing. But in the past, it might have been that, what we heard is Rose Hill. They documented as Rose Hill. Rose Hills is the same thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. My name's Hap Chin. I've been living in a Rose Hill location, started from 1975, 73 until now. And all the three children grew up in Rose Hill, and they go everywhere. And now, when I told I'm here today is for supporting Rose Hill community. All the time, my friends come and visit me, and they always missing the road. They know how to, find missing my house because no sign, and not Lincoln High, not LA. They always go up to the Soto or Mission, so they always miss me. So please put the Rose Hill sign back and put a sign back because for thank you and so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We have other speakers come up. Bill Watkins, Anselmo Flores, David Gallardo.
Okay. My name's Esther Pechar. I've lived in the area since 1950. My grandparents lived here in the 30s, and they've always known this area as Rose Hills. Okay? And I'd like to see the signs go back up saying it's Rose Hills, and we do have a lot of documentation, as you will see later on. And I don't know how they got the petitions, but I know some of them, I have photos where they came onto the property of the church and were telling people that we were changing the name of the church and all that stuff, and they were on church property where they shouldn't have been, getting petitions signed. And they even had one lady who was out in the street, she couldn't even cross the sidewalk in front of the church because she had to go out in the street in her wheelchair. So I just would like to have our sign back, that's all. Thank you.
And before we start, next speaker come up, Perry Petchar. Be right in here. Okay, sir. Mr. Watkins.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Bill Watkins, actually. I'm his chair. Hi. Thank you. Honored Mr. Parks. I'm a fan of LAPD and your service. Thank you. What I wrote down from hearing rebuttals and arguments against having these signs for Rose Hills was the word semantics more than a name change. I came to community action because of illegal firework use in my area. I am what used to be considered perhaps Rose Hill at times. LA Times in the 1950s started referring to us as Rose Hills. Anthony Monsanto has documents for that. And to me, it's a semantical point. What I want is better neighborhood watch, cohesion, a community that's together. From where I live to 2 blocks over to Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. I want that identity, and it can help us better the community where we live, beautify it, and do good community service. So please allow us to have that identity so I can fight my crime that I want to fight and get into it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Anselmo Flores. I speak on the behalf of the Flores family who's been established there on Rose Hill. I agree with some of them on the origins of it, but it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, tomatoes. For me, losing that identity, my family's been established there since 1903, 110 years. So that hill and that church has been there, and for me, I'd rather it be Rose Hills than El Sereno. For me, it's not an identity thing. For me, it's ancestry. I would definitely know that a picture is worth 1,000 words. As you can see, the city's already established it, something that's already existing. So just continue to do the right thing and just give us back what we've already have been established.
Do you have material for the committee? Or?
Do you have that one? Yeah, they'll.
Thank you. Okay, I can get to your two seats. We're going to have two more people come up.
Thank you.
Hilda Magana and Anthony Manzano. If you come up.
Hi, my name is David Gallardo, and I'm a member of the community here at Rose Hills. And, I've been here for about 7 years now, but my family goes back generations in that community, and I support the motion for the proposal to have our signs back. Thank you.
My name's Perry Petchar. I've lived in Rose Hills for all of my 59 years, and I'm just here to support. I hope you replace our Rose Hills signs. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have those two seats and have Jose Ramos and Joe Manzano? And Hilda, we can start with you.
Buenas tardes, señores.
I could translate for her. Her name is Hilda.
Buenas tardes,
She says,
señores.
good afternoon, sir.
Mi nombre es Hilda Magaña.
My name is Hilda Magaña.
Tengo en esa comunidad viviendo más de 35 años.
I have more than 35 years living in that community.
Y desde que llegué allí,
Since the time I got there,
he sabido que se llama Rose Hills.
I've been known that it's called Rose Hills.
Nunca he sabido que se llama otra comunidad. Reconocí una vez que era Lincoln Heights, pero ya después me dijeron que no era Lincoln Heights. Ahora, pues yo dije entonces sí es Rose Hills.
I've never been told that it was anything else until it was mentioned that I was living in Lincoln Heights. But when I found out that I do not live in Lincoln Heights, I'm aware that I live in Rose Hills.
Entonces estoy aquí
So therefore, I'm here today
para pedirles de favor
to ask you in favor
que se haga la instalación de los signs Rose Hills,
to please install the signs that indicate Rose Hills,
porque mi comunidad es Rose Hills.
because my community is Rose Hills.
Muchas gracias, señores.
Thank you so much. Good day, council members. My name is Anthony Manzano, and I stand in favor of the motion as indicated by Councilmember Huizar. Oddly enough, more than half of the people who came to oppose this actually stand and say, you know what, we love the idea. Call it Rose Hill. Well, it's better than being called El Sereno because that's what we are not. We are definitely the community of Rose Hills, as the city sign indicates, which was vandalized and removed, so all we're doing is asking for it to be replaced. I am thankful that they're realizing that the portfolio that I prepared is the truth, and that now that those residents from El Sereno are aware of where the community of Rose Hills is established. There's maps that have been indicated, maps have been submitted, the boundaries of Rose Hills have been submitted, and the northeast corner of Los Angeles is within our community. And basically, I'd like to say that Rose Hills has been validated, verified, and I am vindicated with dignity today to ask that you guys will support the motion and please install the Rose Hill community signs at the indicated locations. And it won't be just for me, it'd be for the countless, numerous residents, stakeholders, church members, people who go to the schools, the parks, and the grocery markets to just recognize where we live. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members Bernard Parks and Mitch O'Farrell. My name is Joe Manzano. I live in the beautiful community of Rose Hills. My family has lived in Rose Hills and the surrounding communities for over 100 years. I am 60 years of age plus. I've attended Huntington Drive Elementary School in the community of Rose Hills during the 1950s. I have played ball there at the Rose Hill Recreation Center during my youth. I made my first Holy Communion at Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish, Rose Hill. I served my country in the United States Marine Corps during the 1970s and returned home to Rose Hills. I own my family home and I live in Rose Hills. I am a participant and very active person in the historic Rose Hills Homeowners Association for the betterment of the community. I support the motion of 11-2057 by Councilman Mr. Jose Huizar and Mr. Rosenthal. Thank you very much. And lastly, sign says Rose Hills Homeowners Association. The grant deed, Rose Hills with the plural, courts project dated back in the 1959. We do have a lot of Rose Hills in plurals, and you'll have the CD that has many documentations with the Rose Hill as plurals. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
The last part I have is John Carbajal. You come up this time. Okay, Mr. Ramos.
Ya, mi nombre es José Ramos, vivo en Rosehill.
My name is Jose Ramos and I live in Rose Hill.
Pertenezco al Cuerpo de Bombero 47.
I live nearby Fire Station 47.
Ayudo a la comunidad siempre, estoy pendiente.
I'm always cognitive of what my community is doing and I represent the community.
Yo necesito que por favor instalen ese rótulo donde nosotros pertenecemos a Rosehill. No es Sereno, no que Rosehill.
I please need you to place the signs that say Rose Hill. It's not El Sereno. Please put the sign up that says Rose Hill.
Y es todo y muchas gracias.
That's everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Carbajal. I am a 25-year resident of Rose Hills. I'm just here to support the signs, support this motion. I want to thank the staff, who's our staff, for bringing our community out of the shadows. And it's a beautiful gem of a community. I ask that all of you one day visit our community. And my community members have said it all. And I support this motion.
Thank you. We have Eric Martel come up representing the 14th District.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. Eric Martel from Councilmember Jose Huizar's office. We were here about a month ago and speaking in support of this motion. And again, we're here in support of this motion. The community has actually gone through an extensive process that our office has asked them to go through with petition and also neighborhood council support from within their own community and in the surrounding communities. They've also gotten support, signatures of petitions as well. And they also have the council office support. So in terms of the DOT actually has referred to this community as Rose Hills as the signs have been up, and I want to say it was multiple, it was just not one. Throughout the years they've been vandalized. I've worked for the council member for 5 years and I actually used to cover this area, and throughout the years the signs have been vandalized and removed, so now none exist, and we want to set the exact boundaries that we submitted last committee meeting at the 5 locations. The original motion included 3 locations, but since redistricting occurred, we included the other 2, which reside within District 14 as well. There's one technical change. There's a misspelling on recommendation number 5, Mercury and Reynolds Place. It's Reynolds, R-E-Y-N-O-D-L. Excuse me, R-E-Y-N-O-L-D-S.
Let me just ask, you explained this to us last time, but go over it again as to why there's no need for a renaming process.
The renaming process, there's an exemption in the renaming process whether there is significant historical significance or it's a community that already exists. There's, as provided for the record, there's maps, there's letters, there's official neighborhood councils that have recognized this area as Rose Hills, and through the clerk's office, we've met with various city clerk's office with the process, and they've told us that we can alter the process, but also accommodate an actual other residents that have opposition to submit for the record, and our needs also as well. The Rose Hills section we're renaming, there's a requirement of at least 10% of the community, and this community is relatively small and won't be able to hit that threshold, and that was one of the reasons why we've asked them to go through various neighborhood councils and the local neighborhood council they exist in as well.
And then let me ask, representative from the library department to come up. You've sent us a letter.
Yes, we did.
Could you
On
explain
July,
to us what the meaningfulness of the letter is?
yes, and I'm Giovanna Menino. I'm Director of Central Library. This is Cynthia McNaughton, Manager of Central Library's History and Genealogy Department. We submitted a letter clarifying a prior letter sent by our librarian, Glenn Creason, in regards to Rose Hills. And in that letter, Mr. Creason noted that the History Department of the Los Angeles Public Library recognizes Rose Hills, also once known as Rancho Rosa de Castilla, as an historic area in Los Angeles. And while the Central Library has a truly extraordinary map collection, one of the finest in the United States, what we do not have is the authority to recognize historic areas in any official way. We can only make available the resources and information regarding those historic areas. So we're not the body that can actually recognize a historic area. And what probably would have been more appropriate in that letter is simply to note that in our map collection, we do have maps that contain the appellation Rose Hill. Those are schools, tracks, housing tracks, streets, and so on.
Okay.
And we do have those with
Do you have a, in the sense of, because I looked at the last paragraph, that you have documentation of the use of Rose Hill or Rose Hills. Is there a period that you can identify, or is this interchangeable?
Well, I have to step up and my apologies. I basically went on the word of the map librarian, Glenn Creason, that he had seen that there were maps in our collection that indicated, again, different points of interest with the name of Rose Hill or Rose Hills. But in all honesty, when I then asked him to then provide me with examples of the maps that he was referring to, and I look at everything that examples he's given me, I only see examples with the appellation Rose Hill. So I don't, that doesn't mean that there aren't other things in our collection that somebody might be able to have dug up, or there doesn't mean there isn't something else there. It just means that, to my knowledge, with the maps I have in hand, I don't have anything that indicates Rose Hills. So again, we cannot officially put a stamp on anything and say this exists or doesn't exist. We simply have the resources and make them available for people to do the research. And so I'm just clarifying that we cannot draw conclusions from the resources that are there. That's for the other people to come and do. But we essentially we are here to, in essence, retract Mr. Creason's statement and replace it with one that simply states that we cannot recognize an historical area.
Let me ask you this, is that to what, when you say that the map's in front of you, what is the depth of the analysis? Is that...
I have examples from different...
No, I mean, what is the depth? Have you looked at what portion of the map's available? Have you cursory review of all of them? I mean, what have you assessed?
This actually was work done by the map librarian, Mr. Creason. So the work that he did, he would have to answer that question. I do not know, I cannot say to you what I have here is X percentage of what we have. All I can glean from what Mr. Creason gave me is that these are the things that he felt were the major items. These are the things that he went to, his go-to items to give to me as examples. What else there may be to review, I can't speak to that.
Okay. Would your mapping reflect some of the locations that many people spoke of as to the names that have been on for years as to parks, areas. Would your maps reflect that?
The map, yes, we reflect Rose Hill Drive. We have a map that reflects a housing tract called Rose Hill Court. We have a map that reflects Rose Hill Park. We have a map that, I thought we had a map that indicated a school, but I don't seem to have that. So.
Oh, yeah, Rose Hill Public School.
Rose Hill Public School. So in all honesty, Mr. Creason did not provide me with anything in this little packet here that actually has anything with the S on the word hill.
The ones you just articulated were all without the S? The
Correct.
park?
That is correct.
Let me ask the city attorney. On this issue, the issue of the S missing or the S added, is that an issue that requires what's considered a name change, or is that something that's been used over time synonymous with the community?
Well, it appears that this isn't a renaming application because we are dealing with what seems to be recognized on both sides as the community called Rose Hill or Rose Hills. It's simply a dispute on whether there's an S on the end of it. So it doesn't appear to be a significant, and the community has always been known as this area, so we're not dealing with a renaming application.
So the issue is...
The issue is, it appears to be that the issue is deciphering what has this area been historically known as, whether it's Rose Hills or Rose Hill, and that's outside of the renaming application.
Well,
Wait a minute. You don't get to do that here.
What we wanted to clarify is that we don't have any, there are no maps that we are aware of that designate a neighborhood. We only have maps that designate what I will call points of interest, which might be a street, which might be a street or a school or a housing tract or a park. Nothing has been identified, as far as I know, that identifies a neighborhood.
Okay, you're going to have to refrain for a minute till we get through this. On the naming of parks, streets, and whatever, go over it again and tell us what have you located in the sense of whether it was with the S or without the S.
We have a 1920 Sanborn map that shows streets with the name West Rose Hill Drive.
And that's with an S?
West Rose Hill, no S, and East Rose Hill Drive. We have a Los Angeles 1912, I think, plat map that again shows Rose Hill Drive, West and East Rose Hill Drive, and a housing tract named Rose Hill Court. We have different maps from different dates, again, just showing again the housing tract Rose Hill Court. We have that a few times, different dates. We have a Los Angeles Railway streetcar and coach route map that shows Rose Hill Park. We have, current Google map shows Rose Hill Park and Rose Hill Recreation Center. And there is a map that shows, where's the one that shows the school?
Oh, right.
That indicates Rose Hill Public School, again, Hill. So again, these are things that indicate points of interest, either a structure or a street. We do not have anything that designates an area as a neighborhood.
And we can't really refute that it doesn't exist elsewhere, because I think exhaustive research has been done possibly on both sides of this issue, and we can't really duplicate that. We can just state what we have at hand.
Yeah, I just want to thank the library department for just at least The issue a month ago was even if the community existed, so at least we know now that the community existed. And given the city attorney's opinion of whether this is a renaming or rechanging of an existing community, which is not, our office definitely feels that we want to move forward with the community naming of Rose Hills, as also like DOT in 2005 placed those neighborhood signs up as well.
Let me just ask, is there any dispute as to the boundaries?
The boundaries, no. Not
Boundaries, either for, against, or identical?
The boundaries, no. We've cross-referenced with the proponents. Also, the opposition knows the boundaries as well. I think the boundaries were an issue a while ago, or the last committee meeting, but the proposed boundaries have not been brought up to my attention or anybody else on our staff.
Okay. And the community doesn't overlap any other community?
No. There's the clear distinction I made last time is that there's a community, and within communities you have neighborhoods. And the El Sereno community is the greater neighborhood. There's 5 other, the greater El Sereno is a greater community, but within El Sereno there's 5 neighborhoods: Rose Hills, Monterey Hills, University Hills, Hillside Village, and
What neighborhood council covers the area?
LA 32. And they have a letter of support from that neighborhood council as well, and surrounding neighborhood councils.
Okay, let me ask you, and I'm going to butcher this, so you're going to have to help me. But there's I guess, boundaries of Rosa de Castilla?
Castilla.
Okay, is that a interpretation or of Rose Hills, or what is it?
It is an interpretation. It's the Rosa de Castilla. It's the Castle of Roses, so of that geographical area. But that map, I believe, is from the 17 or 1800s. So it references Rose.
I have a few questions. Eric, you mentioned that the signs that said Rose Hills were put up in 05?
2005, yeah. They actually submitted that for the record. And when I personally contacted DOT, they've submitted pictures of the actual DOT signs that were placed up.
And how many were up total at one time or another?
At one point, there was 3.
Okay.
But they were 3. But again, like I stated for the record, DOT at that time were putting up these neighborhood signs up, but they weren't keeping boundaries of what it was, and it was determined by the council offices.
And they've all been removed?
They've all been removed.
And so there are also signs that say Rose Hill?
No. There was no sign. There's never been a sign that has existed that said Rose Hills. Rose Hill. I said Rose Hills.
Rose Hill. But no signs that ever said Rose Hill?
No sign.
And so this is kind of a silly question, but how many hills are there?
It's
in this
within that area. There's actually 3. There's 3. That encompasses that community. That community is within those 3 hills.
And of the signatures that have been gathered by the Rose Hills group, approximately what percentage of those signatures have come from residents within that geographic area?
Actually, I would say like at least 95% within that actual area.
Have most people in that area signed the petition?
Yes.
So it's okay. And about how many signatures is that?
About 300 and so signatures.
And let's see. And then, so I'm keenly aware of this self-identification process because of the neighborhood council, because of the history with neighborhood councils. I live in Glassell Park, and I know that within Glassell Park there was a big self-identification battle back in 2001, and part of Glassell Park actually carved away and went away. So I know what that can do for community pride. My question would be, to the folks that identify with Rose Hill, would any effort that you undertake possibly result in a sign or two that said Rose Hill where you feel is appropriate, where you live? Or are you neighbors to the folks who identify with Rose Hills? That's kind of a rhetorical question. I know I can't really ask people who have testified, but that's just something that I'm wondering about. And so that's important as well. So in other words, I guess I could ask this. If we moved forward with a Rose Hills designation, would anything preclude the folks who identify with Rose Hill moving forward with their own designation with the areas that they can justify as Rose Hill, as confusing as that might sound.
I know, I understand where you're coming from. Actually, the opposition's arguments have changed. At first, until today, they've never really recognized Rose Hills as an area. They always wanted to continue calling that area El Sereno. It's up to today's committee meeting where they started nitpicking at whether now they recognize the area, but whether it's plural or not is what I'm assuming they're arguing now.
So I would suggest to the Rose Hill enthusiasts that you engage in a process wherein you feel that you can identify areas that are Rose Hill. I respect the process greatly, but I do feel that the residents of the so-called Rose Hills have decided over the years, at least since the 1950s, that they live in Rose Hills, that evidence is very clear to me, and it's not to diminish at all the folks who identify with Rose Hill. But if you have an overwhelming majority of people who live in an area that has historical significance in terms of your identification, where you identify you live, then that means something. And so I would support that.
Let me ask one thing. This came to council a while back?
Correct.
And was sent back to the committee. What was the expectation of sending it back to committee? What was the office looking for?
That at least the opposition recognized the community, and I think we did that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me make a proposal that we move this forward to city council, and we'd ask the library department that if you would continue your research and find if there's a time period that you can offer to the council when this comes before council, we'd appreciate it. All right, thank you. We'll move that. And so we have no more cards, no more agenda items. So we're adjourned.